everybody. This is Kelly Jackson with Still Not Canceled. For decades, we've been told that immigration, birthright citizenship, and deportation are all separate issues. They're not. In fact, they're all part of the same constitutional argument. And yesterday's court ruling may have just given us a glimpse of where that argument is headed. So today we're going to cover Trump's deportation victory. Person versus citizen. This is what the Supreme Court rulings with regard to immigration and birthright citizenship really boil down to. Constitution versus precedent. For decades and decades, as a lot of people know, the law of the land has been boiled down to the most recent Supreme Court precedent that has been issued. That's the law of the land. A lot of conservative attorneys that I know argue that is the problem. We have strayed from utilizing the Constitution and the text of that document as what is and isn't actually constitutional. And then sovereignty versus due process. Who decides immigration policy? Is it Congress, the president, or the courts? So the big question that I am asking today, does the Constitution treat a person and a citizen the same way? It's a question that I have often asked myself. Why does a person, just because their feet are touching the land, what entitles them to the same rights and protections as a citizen? And we're going to talk about all of those things today on Still Not Canceled. Again, my name is Kelly Jackson. Thank you for joining me. If you haven't yet joined the community, like and subscribe. Let's just jump right in with this post from Stephen Miller. So let's start first with this clip from Stephen Miller. In 1996, Congress passed a law creating a special fast-track deportation process. Okay, 1996. So this has been on the books since then. For illegals who have been inside the U.S. for 2 years or less. After adoption, it was never applied outside very limited circumstances. In 2004, the Bush administration published a notice in the Federal Register limiting expedited removal, or ER, to within 14 days and 100 miles of the border. So not the entire interior and not for up to 2 years. But if you were going to try to catch somebody, it had to be within 2 weeks, and it couldn't be any further into the interior than 100 miles within the border, that's a Republican. We want to blame the Democrats for this crazy progressive immigration policy, but that was George Bush, which sort of makes sense if you understand, like, the California Republicanism that I grew up with, where I saw a lot of squishy, feckless, greedy Republicans in California turn a blind eye to illegal immigration. Because why? In California, it provided a lot of their corporate rich friends with all of the cheap labor imported from south of the border into California that they could possibly want or need. And so they sold off their authority to Democrats over time, so long as they got concessions like those. In the first Trump administration, DHS extended the expedited removal to the full statutory construction enacted by Congress. It was immediately blocked by a federal judge. Of course it was, probably in California. The Biden administration later formally restored the Bush policy. So on the same team, in the same swamp, formally restored that policy. On the first full day in office, January 21st, 2025, President Trump's DHS again restored the long unenforced statute. Okay, so we're going back to what Congress passed in 1996. The president is trying to follow the letter of the law passed by Congress, people who represent you, okay? And was again blocked by a rogue judge. Today, and this is yesterday, an appeals court has finally vacated that injunction. This ongoing saga is a tragically illustrative example of just how many forces are at work constantly and over many years to deny Americans their sovereignty. So the main thesis that we're going to be talking about on this live stream today is birthright citizenship and deportation due process are not separate legal fights. They are two sides of the same constitutional question. Both ask what legal rights flow from being physically present in the US, your feet on the ground, being a person, in other words, just being alive and living in the United States, or being a citizen, which we all know is something completely different. If you even go back in time, go back to the Roman Empire. Being a Roman citizen meant something. That's why they built a wall, because if you could get into the Roman Empire and you could establish Roman citizenship, it had its privileges. You notice that that's like that tagline from that old ad we used to have. You don't hear it too much anymore because it's probably bigoted, but it's true. Citizenship has its privileges, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So personhood and citizenship are not the same thing according to the Constitution. For decades, we had groups like the ACLU. They relied very, very heavily, and they still to a degree do, on Supreme Court precedent that gave them the flexibility that the constitutional text did not provide. It was much less helpful. They were then cornered into a specific definition of a specific word. They much preferred an expansive precedent where they could pull whatever they wanted from those rulings that applied to the point that they were trying to make. Now, with a more originalist and textualist Supreme Court, they're being forced back to the actual text. So for decades, precedent shaped the meaning of the Constitution. Now, originalists that are on the Supreme Court are asking whether the text should reshape the precedent. And I think a lot of us would say yes. So I have a clip for you from Dad Saves America. And it's a really great podcast. The guest today is a guy named Randy Barnett, who's an attorney. He is an author of many books on the Constitution and the legal doctrines therein and the courts and how all of this basically goes together. This is called The Supreme Court Case That Could End Birthright Citizenships. Listen for the distinction that he's going to make between natural rights and the government's duty to its own citizens.
Next chapter after that is about immigration. And I do think the government's first duty, this is actually the Equal Protection Clause, the first duty of government is to protect the rights of its citizens. It has no general warrant to protect the rights of all people in the world. Those people have natural rights, but the government that's here only exists to protect the rights of its citizens. Part of it is obvious. You should go out and use police to protect your rights. That's what the southern states were not doing, which is why the 14th Amendment got enacted with an Equal Protection Clause. But the other thing is to decide who gets to come in and who doesn't get, who gets to reside here permanently and who does not get to reside here permanently. Mm-hmm. And it may very well be that there might be some freedom of travel that people can travel through the United States or to and come and go, but not settle here. And a civil society is a membership society. You have membership in it. That's what we just were talking about. What does it mean to be a citizen of the United States? It means you're the member of this particular civil society, not another one, not a foreign power, but this one. And the government of this one has a duty to protect the rights of the people who comprise it here, the rights of the people it represents here. And if that means keeping people from other countries from coming here and undermining the rights and liberties of Americans, this is the first duty of government. And it's as big a duty of government as to protect from literal armed invasion, which is also a danger, and which is what the other chapter is about. But it also protects us from these other sorts of things. And that is the duty of government. Nobody has a right to come and live here permanently, just as we don't have a right. And if you try to exercise it, you'd soon find you have no right to settle in France permanently. You have no right to settle anywhere in Europe or in Latin America. Well, there may be a couple places in Latin America. There's some exceptions. But by and large, you can't go Americans can't go elsewhere and settle without the permission of their governments, and other people can't come here.